Right, today's job is skirting boards in this bedroom. So I've cut them roughly to length and pre-painted them. They're solid wood skirting boards. Obviously you've seen the ones I've used downstairs. It's the same stuff, it's going to be a little bit different in here because this room is lime plastered as opposed to being plasterboarded. So this is a really old cottage. It's a couple of 100 years old. The walls are not straight at all. I'll give you an example. So you can kind of see this one in particular is really out. So I'm not going to be able to glue these skirting boards on. I'm going to screw them on. So I'm going to have to be pretty careful because there's a lot of sockets. There's the wires run up from below. So there's one there, 4 there, 1 round here. Luckily I can see where the wires are for the most part because there's a little bit of a gap between the floor and the walling. So, and obviously there's lights running up for there's wires running up for the lights as well. So I'm just gonna have to be pretty careful because in some places, yeah, so you can't see the wire down there. So I'm just gonna have to try and avoid putting a screw in directly below the lights and kind of hope the wires are vertical. Hope they run vertically below the light so that I can gauge exactly where they are. It's mainly, I think it's mainly that one. These ones, again, I should be able to work out where they are because there's a little bit of a gap between the wall and the floor. Also got pipes to think about. There's pipes running through there and they do actually come up behind here, so I'm going to have to be careful where I'm screwing into the wall there as well. But hopefully it'll go to plan. This is the machine I'm going to be using for making the cuts into the skirting board. It's a chop saw or mitre saw. This is a pretty cheap one from Screwfix. I've had it a few years now. Not sure if they still sell it or not. It's called Evolution Rage. And it's been pretty good. It's not the most accurate in terms of the angles that it's cut in. So, it does have markings on here. I don't know if you can see that, it's a bit dirty. So it's set at 90-degree cuts at the moment, which is 0. And you can pull it round to, you can't see that at all. It does say 45 down there in the corner. So that's 30. And over there's 45. Likewise on this side, so you can spin it round and it'll do a 45-degree cut. And it's also a rolling mitre saw, so it does have movement that way as well. So it's pretty good for skirting boards. Also for the like the pelmets in the kitchen and things like that. I found that as long as you put a good quality blade on it, it does do a decent job. So I've got I forget the make of the blade, but it's got 80 teeth. So as far as I understand it, maybe somebody can correct me on this, but in my mind, the more teeth, the finer the cut and the better quality the cut. And the other thing that's really good about this mitre saw is it's got like a plunge cutting, I think it calls it a trench cutting ability, so you can set the depth at which you want to cut. So there's a little screw on the far side and you can tighten it up and it will, instead of at the moment it's set to cut right through, but if you tighten the screw up, it creates a limit whereby you can't push it down any further. So, if you just want to do, say a 10mm cut into a 20mm thick piece of timber, you can just set it and it allows what they call a trench cut, I think, which is what I did with the skirting boards downstairs in the hallway when I wanted to go around the corners, because I didn't want to cut all the way through the wood. I just wanted to cut the majority of the way through, but leave the face of the board intact. That's the big board along the back wall, cut and ready to be screwed on. Because the adjacent walls are so uneven, I did have to scribe both ends of the board to make it fit properly. So I've gone along and I've just marked on. I've used a, you know, one of those little gadgets, one of these, I don't know what you call it, a wire finder, just to make 100% sure where my wires are below these sockets, and I've marked on the back of the board where I need to avoid screwing through. So now I'll screw through, drill through, put roll plugs in the wall and get it attached. I'm just using a countersink drill bit to countersink the screw heads, and that'll mean that I can filler over the top of them after it's all screwed on. So that's that first piece on, and it's actually pulled in really well. I don't know if you can see, especially there. There's quite a big kind of bulge in the wall, and it's just flexed around it, and the screws have pulled it in quite nicely. So yeah, I think it's going to be okay. Quite surprised it's worked out that well. I thought it was going to be really quite tricky to bend it round the uneven wall. These bits where there's a little bit of a gap, I'll just caulk that, I would think. I suppose I could put an extra screw in there and it might pull it in, but that's going to be behind the bed anyway, so I'm not too bothered. So this next board, I need to connect in this corner. So I know some people do a 45-degree mitre in the corners, the same way as you would do for an external corner, but obviously the opposite. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to scribe this board to this one. So this one's been cut at 90 degrees, so it's got a square end, it goes right into the wall. And this one is going to be scribed onto it. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to cut 45 degrees like that. So that angle vertically with the chop saw on this board at the end, and then that's going to basically leave the profile that's necessary to get over to meet this board properly. And it's a little bit fiddly, but I'll show you how I do it. Right, here's one I did earlier, which I'll try and explain. So this board here is cut at 90 degrees at the end, just got a straight cut. And this one is, I don't know, would you say it's scribed or it's mitered into it? I'm not sure. But basically the way I did it was, I've used this one as an example. So I cut 45 degrees that way, vertically down the board. And that gives the profile, if you can see, up here and across. So this top section sticks out further than the bottom section, so it's going to go over, like this one has, over this board. But obviously there's all this excess timber on here at the moment, so that needs to be cut off. So what I did was I run a jigsaw along here and round at a slight angle, so it was not vertically down, it was slightly that way, which just means that it means that this edge here is the bit that's protruding the most. When you offer it up like that, it means that this is the final edge of the board. So what I'm trying to say is, when I cut it back a bit at this angle. I didn't just cut vertically down with the jigsaw, I cut slightly back, so that when you push it together, it fits neatly, like this one has. Right, so I've prepared this one in the same way as I just described. So it's had a 45-degree cut which has exposed the top profile more than the bottom, because obviously it's not as thick. It's hard to explain, but that's how it works. And then I've run along with the jigsaw to take off the excess timber, as I say, at a slight angle, if you can see, slightly angled back so that the front timber is protruding, the front face is protruding a little bit more than the back face. So that means hopefully it'll fit. I have to put this end in first. And then the profile is an exact match. So I might have to take just a fraction off the other end of this board just to allow that to sit back to the wall. So I've just shaved about probably 2 mil off the other end of the board, and yeah, this end is fitting quite nicely now. Obviously I'll still need to caulk it in the corner there once I've finished. So I'll screw this one on now. It's not too bad, this wall, it's reasonably straight, I would say. Incidentally, these little digital laser measurers are really good for doing skirting boards, because all you have to do is put one end on one wall, and the laser will measure the distance, and it'll tell you exactly the distance to the other wall, and they do seem to be pretty accurate. I would say they're usually within a couple of mil. And that basically is how I'm going to do this wall. Once I've screwed this board on, that corner has got a straight 90-degree cut, which means this board will have to be, again, I don't know if you call it mitered or scribed into this corner the same way, and it'll have a 90-degree cut on that end, finished by the fireplace. This board here will be easy because it's just a straight board between the door and the fireplace, straight cut on both ends. This one will be a little bit fiddly because of the radiator pipes, but I'll just notch them in at the bottom, and it'll be straight cuts 90 degrees at that end, and this end will be mitered in or scribed in to this corner. And that'll be it, that'll be the room finished. So yeah, let me know in the comments if you think I've done anything the more difficult way than I could have, if there was an easier way of doing it, because I've said before, I'm not a joiner. I just I've had a flick around on YouTube and come up with this way of doing it, judging by what other people do, but there may well be a better or an easier way of doing it, and if you know one, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.